Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video from Aman Talks NRL SuperCoach. Now this episode is going to be a bit of a doozy. Today we're talking about the centre wing position, looking at guns, mid-ranges and the cheapies. Now before you guys in the comments say, why haven't you talked about this player or that player? There's so many centre wings to talk about. I just couldn't quite fit in everyone. Hopefully I've covered enough of the kind of popular picks or the kind of hot discussion points. So hopefully you find some value out of the video. If you do, really appreciate a thumbs up. Do please consider subscribing to the channel as well if you haven't already. And let's get straight into the video. So the centre wing position is traditionally one where we try to go for guys who've got higher base just to have a little bit more security in terms of scoring. But we've seen in the past couple of seasons that going for players who have a little bit higher of an upside definitely is the way to go. We're seeing, in the top 20 averaging players of the last 3 years, we went from 2 to 3 and then to 4 in the last 3 seasons. Now, obviously, someone like Nico Hines last season, you can see there, he was playing most of the time at the fullback position, even though you could pick him up in centre wing. And then even the likes of Ruben Garrick and Brian To'o, they were both wingers, as was Alex Johnston as well. So that is definitely, I think, something that's worthwhile to consider if you are looking to pick some centre wing players. Even in 2020, you had David Nofaluma and Daniel Tupou, both who are wingers. And then in 2019, you had Latrell and again, David Nofaluma. So I think there is definitely a trend where if you are picking players, if you're a bit in of a 50-50, we tend to see that the guys who are out on the wing who finish off the tries, because the tries are worth 17 points, which is so many, and then guys who goal kick on top of that, like, Ruben Garrick, or guys like To'o who have got amazing base on top of that try scoring potential. That's, I think, where we see the genuine upside in the centering position. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to ignore anyone who's playing in the center position, but I think there is a bit of a trend where players on the wing, they do seem to perform better for SuperCoach. That's something I'm thinking about a little bit more because they do have that tendency to kind of provide a little bit more base coming out of their own end, plus have that try scoring ability as well. So something to keep in mind, I think, when you're picking your center wings in general. Start of the season, obviously there'll be a bit of a discussion as to whether you go really heavy with kind of your gun players or go cheap with a lot of the value picks, and there do seem to be quite a few value picks. So let's get into the players right away. So first up, we're going to be looking at the guns category of the centering position. Now, just to give my overall thoughts as to whether you should actually invest in this kind of higher price category for the center wings to start this season, as we're going to see a little bit later, I do think there are quite a few good, cheap and value in the mid-range options. And so I'm not necessarily sure if I want to spend that much in the center wing position to start off with. I think if I was only going to go for one gun player, to be honest, it would be Brian To'o. He is obviously extremely expensive at 737k, but To'o has just got that perfect combination of amazing base, amazing tackle breaking ability. You can see the average of 42 base is just insane, and that's almost rivaling some second row forwards. Then obviously you've got the evasive numbers, and then you can add on some good try scoring ability. He's just one of the most consistent options. If you look at his C.V, so if you haven't seen any previous preseason videos, the C.V, the coefficient of variance, we want that number to be lower. That shows how consistent the player is. And you can see To'o at 0.34. I think he is, he's almost the most consistent player in this list here. And he played almost every game for the Panthers. So you know that you can just absolutely trust him. You're obviously trusting a very good Panthers side who've got a pretty decent draw to begin the season. Now that's kind of like honestly, that's my general thought, I think, for the center wing gun position. To'o is the one I would go for if I could only go for one. But kind of what I was saying earlier, I'm not necessarily certain if I'd be spending so much money in one player to begin the season. Maybe on the lower end, around the 500k I might, but around the 700k, I do think that could be something that I might not look to go with. Later on in the season, though, I think I'll get onto, different squad structures as well. So like Ruben Garrick at 768k. Now, we saw him do extremely well last season, mainly on the back of Tom Trbojevic, and generally the whole Manly side did well on the back of Tom. They haven't got the best start to the season. I've got them ranked 12th. Also, a quick plug, if you kind of want to see where I get these rankings of terms of the draw, do follow me on Twitter. I just released earlier today a little bit of a mini thread going through my kind of matrix in terms of the fixture difficulty, and I've sorted that for the first 4, 6, and then the 8 rounds, and you'll kind of see why I've got Manly as 12, and this is based on the first 6 games of the season. I don't see him kind of keeping pace in terms of, his 85 average to begin the season, and I think there definitely is scope for him to actually lose cash, especially with the first 2 games of the season for Manly being the Panthers and the Roosters. I just don't see the worth investing in Garrick, straight away. I think obviously at some point later on, if he gets discounted, and obviously if he continues to scoring, we'll probably have to I'll eat my words, and we'll try to find a way to bring him in. But to start the season, I would much prefer to go for To'o, who's just a lot more safer and a lot more secure in his point scoring. Again, a similar trend you're going to notice with a lot of my kind of thoughts around a lot of these gun options. I don't think there's quite enough value in them. Like Alex Johnston at 638k. The Panthers' first 4 games of the season are extremely tough. I believe they played the Storm, the Panthers, and the Roosters in that stretch. So it's a really tough 4 games, and especially at the beginning of the season, I don't see him kind of matching his price tag of 638k. So I definitely think there is scope for him to lose money. The base is nothing to talk about. Alex Johnson is not one of those wingers who gets you a lot of hit ups and tackles, etc. He's mainly known for his point scoring and his try scoring. So obviously that's shown there in that scoring stat of 24, only behind Ruben Garrick, who goal kicks on top of that. But personally, I'm not looking to start with Johnston either. He can be a little bit more inconsistent. You can see 0.56, although when the Rabbitohs got into a really nice run of games last season, he became more consistent because he was getting basically 1 or 2 tries every single game. But without Latrell to the first couple of rounds, no Adam Reynolds, I don't quite know how their attack's going to go. So Johnson is definitely a avoid for me to begin the season. Similar with Dane Gagai. The base for Gagai is good, but I don't think he'll benefit that much from the players around him as much as what he did at the Rabbitohs now that he is at the Knights. And the Knights also do have a tough run to begin the first 6 games. I've got them ranked 13th. So Gagai, I think there's too much of an unknown around, how much kind of upside he's going to get. The base is pretty solid, but at 600k, you're going to want more than just good base numbers. So I think Gagai, again, is an avoid for me. Val Holmes now, Cowboys actually do have on paper, in my opinion, the best draw for the first 6 games of the season. But the word is that Holmes potentially has been, practicing in the center position. Now with Holmes, I see the real benefit with Holmes if he's playing at fullback and if he's goal kicking. If he's not playing at fullback, he doesn't go through as much work. He doesn't get as involved in terms of the attacking plays, because if he's at the center wing position, he's just going to stick to one side of the field. So Holmes at 560k, again, if it does come out that he is playing in the centers, I probably will definitely avoid. If come round 1, we actually find out he's playing at fullback, although Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow has been tipped to be the starting fullback for the Cowboys. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to go with Holmes either. And yeah, you can see the current narrative I'm telling myself for a lot of these players. I think there's too many unknowns to be spending that much amount of money. When I want to spend a lot of money in one particular player, I want to know that they're kind of a sure thing, which is why Toto I'm comfortable with if you're going to spend that much in one player. But a lot of these other ones, if they've got a bit of an unknown, not quite sure if I can stretch up to them. Jordan Rapana is definitely an interesting one. He's someone I kind of was recommending quite a bit last season, but I never went on him myself. He had a bit of a resurgence, averaging around 63, and the Raiders do have a pretty decent run to begin the first 6 games of the season. Now, the thing with Rapana that I think was really benefiting him at the end of last season was that he was playing at the fullback. So I've just got the scores up here actually when he was playing at the fullback position. He had 97, 81, 63, 44, 37, 124, and 41. So there were some games where he was scoring a little bit down. He was pretty solid with some good 81, 97 point games and some big upside games as well of 124. But just looking at some other scores during the season as well, he had an 87, 75, 106, a couple of 60s as well. So he actually proved to be fairly consistent throughout the season, and that's kind of reflected in that C.V number of 0.39. That's one of the better numbers and that table below me. That kind of does help in the fact that he's got pretty decent base of 29. He has got some good tackle breaking ability as well. I mean, 555k, it is, in my opinion, expensive for Rapana, but it's a pretty decent draw to begin the season. I think he's one of those guys who I'd probably identify as a, if you've got the spare cash and you can actually upgrade one of your center wings to that, kind of price category, I think he could be a super interesting kind of point of difference pod player to go for. So Rapana, I'm not totally down on, in terms of this list of players in the gun category. And he's definitely someone I could potentially go for if I've got the budget and, I've got a bit of, a feeling to go for a pod in the center wing. Similar story, I think, with Joey Manu from the Roosters. So I do have more faith in the Roosters than I do the Raiders. Decent run as well to begin the first 6 games of the season. I've got them ranked as 5th. And the Roosters just long term have got really, really nice games. So I think if you're looking for a center wing that you can plug in for more of a long term pick, I do like the look of a Joey Manu. Now, Manu never really kind of does super well when he plays in the center wing position. Most of his good scores tend to come when he's playing at the fullback spot. Just in terms of his overall point scoring, it's definitely trended up in the past few seasons. So 2019, he averaged 49, 2020, 56, 2021, 62. So maybe we're going to see continual growth, or maybe he gets up to like 65, 66 average. Then there definitely would be value in him, at 539k. We know the benefit of Manu is that if you do stick with him for the long term, you're probably going to get overall decent average. And eventually when the likes of Tedesco go to State of Origin, Joey Manu, a Kiwi, he probably will slot in at fullback or can even play at the 5'8 spot. And we know how effective he is in either of those two positions. So Manu, if you're looking for a nice longer term pick, just trying to get a piece of the kind of Roosters pie to begin the season, I don't mind him as a bit of a pod. I actually probably would prefer him to Daniel Tupou. I just think he's got that extra versatility, and I think he has more of that upside, especially when he gets to play in that fullback spot. Addo Carr, I'm not going to talk about Addo Carr that much in detail. I think the fact that he's gone to the Bulldogs, who've got a really tough run of games to begin the season, he just doesn't have the work rate to kind of justify consistent scores. And you can see a C.V of 0.68. That's basically Adokar. He'll score 5 tries for you in one game, and then he'll go on a run maybe where he doesn't get a try for 5 games. He's just got very high volatility in his scoring, and I don't think he's going to do as well in any case now that he's moved from the Storm to the Bulldogs. So Adokar is definitely an avoid for me. Tupou, I don't mind, but as I kind of mentioned, I think I do prefer Manu, even just for that extra 20k. Tupou has got that good base, but we did kind of see a bit of a down year from Tupou. Maybe you could think that he'd do better this year, but I think I prefer the Roosters' right side attack than I do their left side. Their right side attack will have the likes of, Tedesco is going to be everywhere on the field anyway, but on the right side, you've got Luke Keary, you've got Joey Manu, you might potentially also have Joseph Suwali if he gets the right wing spot. I just think that side of the field is a bit more attacking than the left-hand side of the Roosters. Now, don't get me wrong, the left side of the Roosters is just fine as well. But Tupou, yeah, he just had a bit of a down year. The base was good, but he just lacked kind of that genuine upside. So I'm not sure entirely about Tupou. And now the last 3 kind of gun centre wings that I'm going to talk about is Brian Kelly, Greg Marzhew, and Corey Thompson. I feel like I can kind of talk about all 3 of them at the same time because they're all playing for the Gold Coast Titans. All average very similar to each other. I mean, Marzhew and Thompson, I'd probably favour a little bit over Brian Kelly. I mean, I know there's not much of a big price difference between them, but Marzhew's got the base. Well, I mean, to be honest, all 3 of them actually have a pretty good base. Corey Thompson also does benefit from some good tackle breaking ability, same as Marzhew as well. And maybe I could just kind of refer to that piece I talked about having wingers potentially over the centre wings. Now you might be thinking, why are you talking about Manu over Tupou? He plays in the centre compared to the wing. Maybe I'll have to eat my words on that one, but I do prefer Marzhew and Thompson. I just think that playing on the wing, they've probably got that potential to score tries a little bit better than the likes of a Brian Kelly. All 3 are not bad in terms of consistency. Marzhew actually comes out on top in terms of consistency at 0.28, and he also had 50% of his games scoring over 60 points. So given that Marzhew's got the best base, still plays on the wing, and is probably a little bit more consistent than the other 2, if you are looking to go for a Titan center or a winger, Marzhew is probably the way that I go if he does nail down that wing spot. So we're just getting started, guys. We're getting into the mid-range center wings now, and I'll start off with 2 Dragons players in Jack Bird and Zach Lomax. Now, both very similarly priced at $499 and $497k. They equally both also have a very tough run to begin the season. Lomax had a very good 2020 season in Supercoach, but he had injuries for quite a bit of last season. But one thing I wanted to point out was in even the few games he played last season, he had 58% of his games scoring over 60 points and was decently consistent at 0.44. Now, it is worthwhile mentioning that one of his games was injury affected, where he only scored 5 points in 18 minutes. In every other game where he played 80 minutes throughout the whole season, he actually averaged 61. So I do think that he can easily maintain that because he is a goal kicker. And the Dragons, while the draw is tough on paper, they do have a nice young crop of players coming through like Amon, Jaden Sullivan, Terrell Sloan, there's another one. So there may be potentially an exciting attacking team, but to begin the season with a tough draw, you might want to just maybe give it a miss. But he's definitely someone I'm eyeing up as well. I think $497 is probably a little bit expensive, and I think because they've got a tough run to begin the season, you might just see potentially his price go down a little bit. And I do like that because I think Lomax is a genuine Supercoach option. Just to begin the season though, I'm not sure if I'd go there, but he's definitely someone I always keep an eye on because he does tend to be quite consistent and can be a very good long-term hold. Now, Jack Bird, it kind of does depend, I think, on the position that he plays. If he's playing in the actual centres, I don't think he's as good of an option. If he actually gets played in the forwards, I do like him more as an option just because he's got pretty good base and he tends to kind of also escalate that if he does actually play in the back row as well. I've just pulled up some stats of Jack Bird's from 2021. So he played 4 games in the back row, and in those games he scored 93, 56, 69 and 51, which are pretty decent. So in those games he had base points of 48, 53, 47 and 37. So there's some pretty good base numbers there. And so I think if he gets named on a starting edge for the Dragons potentially, then Bird I think could be a very interesting consideration. The benefit of Bird is that he is also dual flexibility, so you can pick him up in the second row forward and the centering position, so that is something that could add to his appeal. I mean, in the long term I'd probably would pick Lomax just because he's a lot more secure in his position, that he's going to play in the centres and he's the goal kicker. But either of the two I don't think I'd start the season with, unless we find out maybe that Bird is playing in the forwards to begin the year. Campbell Graham I've got here. Now, he was definitely one of the more underwhelming players from the Rabbitohs from a Supercoach point of view, mainly because he was playing on the right side of the field. Now, the left-hand side of the field is really where the Rabbitohs had their bread and butter in terms of point scoring. You can see like Gagai and Johnston were really high on the centre wing averaging players, but Graham was a little bit lower. Now, there is some rumour potentially that he could actually line up at left centre. If he plays at left centre, that is very, very interesting, I think, because he's got very good base of 34 points per game. The scoring was a lot down, obviously, 8 points there. But if he does play on that left side, closer to Cody Walker, I do think Campbell Graham could be an option as well. I did mention that they've got a pretty tough run to begin the first 4 games of the season, so I probably wouldn't start with him, but definitely someone I'm looking to pick up maybe if he is playing at left centre from around rounds 5 onwards. Now, Paul Moravsky as well has come to the Roosters. If he gets a starting role in the back line, has also been tipped to be goal kicking for the Roosters. Now, if he's goal kicking, playing for a good Roosters team, I definitely think there is also value in going for Momirovski. The base is fine. A lot of these centres, they have pretty decent base as well. Momirovski tends to be quite selfish as well. He tends to not pass the ball too much towards outside winger. So say, for example, if Momirovski's playing at left centre, I don't like Tupou even more then, because Tupou might not get as much of the ball. But if he plays on the right, maybe a similar story for whoever plays on the Roosters right wing. But Momirovski could, again, be one of those players who's a nice pod, goal kicking. I do like that if that is actually how he ends up being used at the Roosters. Now, Ewan Aitken, I think, is definitely one of those bigger discussion points beginning of the season. Has been widely tipped to be playing in the starting back row for the Warriors to begin the season. Now, the Warriors have got an excellent draw to begin the year. I've got them ranked second in my own kind of fixture difficulty matrix. Now, him playing in the back row, I've got that little asterisk there because I just wanted to show his stats when he was playing in the back row last season. It was a pretty small sample size, but he was averaging a 52 base, 14 in evasive numbers and 14 in scoring. Now, obviously, the scoring probably isn't as sustainable because he was scoring quite a few tries when he was playing in the back row. But you could make an argument now that they've got Sean Johnson back with a nice easy run to begin the year. If he's playing in a back row, he probably has got that potential to be able to score a few more tries. Combine that with his really good base, I think at 486k, there's also definite validity to pick him in your actual second row forward because he is dual listed. I think if you've got enough other good value players in your centre wing that you can't fit in Aiken, I would definitely look to get him in your second row forward. I think 100% he was going to be in my starting team barring any kind of injury, I think, in the preseason, because if he's playing in the back row, he's going to offer, I think, great value. You can see that 486k, but he's giving you base of 52. He's going to definitely make some money to begin the year and also provide some good scoring as well. So looking at David Nofaluma, at the very beginning of the video, you could see that he was one of the top 20 averaging players both in 2019 and 2020. It was a big drop off though in 2021. Part of that was probably the lack of like a Benji Marshall, even like Adam Dewey. He also, similar to Moravsky, he can be a little bit selfish and tend to go for runs for himself and not pass out to his winger as much. Nofaluma's base was also a bit down. That's probably the more concerning thing. We normally associate Nofaluma with really high base. Just going back in the past couple of seasons, in 2019, he actually had a base average of 33, and in 2020, it was 31, and now it's gone down to 26 in 2021. So the base has been gradually decreasing, and I think that is a bit concerning because if he's not able to get the tries on top of his good base, I just don't see how he's going to offer value. I picked him up for a good Tigers run last season, and I just didn't get that many good scores out of him, so I'm a little bit cold on Nofaluma. Tane Milne, again, I've got him here potentially if he gets that left centre wing position for the Rabbitohs. He could be a consideration, but I do also feel like his point scoring was definitely kind of boosted by a lot of tries. He had games where he was playing on the right wing last season where he was getting a lot of tries, really. So I'm not sure how sustainable that's going to be in terms of his average if he actually does get named at the centre position. Now, Kotoni Staggs, he's 39% owned in the game at the moment, which is one of the highest ownerships for a centre wing, and I think it's for good reason. So he only played a few games last year. He was hampered with injuries. In the 4 games he played last season, he had scores of 64, 50, 43 and 90, and then he missed the rest of the season again. So very small sample size. He has been injury riddled in the past few seasons, which could be a bit of a question mark around him. But we just know what a talented player he is. The evasive numbers are pretty good at 23 because he's got that good tackle breaking ability. This isn't quite as good as some of these other centers, but the points mainly come from tackle breaks and scoring points, or even setting up his winger. So you can see there the average just in that 4-game sample is quite a bit higher than a lot of these other mid-ranges, but he's priced at 433k. So that's why so many people are appealed by him, and obviously people know what a talented player he is. Average 59 in 2020, so we know that there is a player there who can, over a longer stretch of games, get close to a 60 average. I think if he's fit and healthy and no injuries, I really like Tony Staggs to begin the year. The Broncos actually don't have a bad run to begin the season as well, so 433k we know how good of a player he is. That's why he's going to be in so many teams, and I really don't mind the pick as well. And definitely I'm very seriously considering putting him as well in my center position. Now the final three, I'm not too keen on any of them really that much. I mean, Stephen Crichton at 433k, he definitely had a regression last season. The year that he came into the scene, he really had a big Supercoach point scoring average because he was scoring a lot of tries. Going back to his 2020 numbers, he actually had an 8-game stretch where he scored a try in every game. So Crichton, I'm just not sure if those numbers are sustainable. The base is pretty good. We know that when Cleary goes away on Origin duty, Crichton does get the goal kicking, but I just don't think there are enough reasons to go for him. You can see last season, only 22% of the time he scored over 60, so he wasn't even giving you those nice kind of, steady scores. Well, he was giving you steady scores, but not the point scoring that you really wanted. So Crichton, I'm not too keen on, to be honest. Tabuai is really a punt, mainly on the draw, I think, for the Cowboys, because the Cowboys draw is the best, in my opinion, for the first 6 games of the year. Doesn't quite have the base, though, of a lot of these other players. He is tipped to be playing at the fullback spot, and I think fullbacks in general we like for Supercoach because they're a lot more involved in the attack. So 418k, mad Cowboys fan, or you really like the look of just going for fullbacks in your center wing, or Tabuai. I mean, I really rate him as a player. He's super quick. He looks so good on the eye as well. He could just be a nice fun pick to go for based on the draw. Again, if you're looking to fill in one of your centers with a real pod player. I've got Jason Saab, but realistically, I don't know if in good faith if I can recommend Saab. I mean, Saab at some points did so well last year, but it was all down to Tom Trbojevic. So I think the same kind of rhetoric I use with Garrick, it's similar with Saab. The base is just, it's horrible. 18 points a game. It's even worse than the likes of an Alex Johnston. Not going to offer you any kind of base, good consistency. It's all about the try scoring. And so, I mean, obviously Manly, if they kick on from last season, can definitely put on a lot of points on teams. And then Saab might be worthwhile, but given the fact that they start with the Panthers and then the Roosters, after those 2 games, he probably will drop in price. And Jason Saab, I just don't think I can recommend him to begin the year. I'm a little bit cold on him as well. Now, finally, taking a look at the cheapies, there's going to be a lot of names that I think you're going to recognize if you browse like Twitter, Facebook comments, YouTube, any kind of Rate My Team forums. You're going to see the likes of Targo, Suwali, Will Penasini, Taylor May, Aman, from the Dragons as well. They're all names that you're going to see in a lot of teams, and there's a good reason why. At the beginning of the season, a lot of the game is around like cash generation, and I think these kind of center wings who are a little bit cheaper, who hopefully should be starting for their respective teams, they can have a lot of volatility in point scoring, but especially the guys who are playing in the slightly better teams like, Targo, Taylor May, Will Penasini, Suwali, playing for pretty decent teams that can definitely, obviously the Panthers won the comp last year, Roosters a good team, Eels a pretty solid team as well. I think these are very safe kind of, cheap center wing options that you can go for. And so I think there's no real risk going for any of them really, and I'm not going to really go into too much detail about them. But I think if all of these guys get named in their kind of starting team, I think Targo, Suwali, Penasini and Taylor May are all very good, safe options that you can go for as terms of cheapies in your center wing. Some of the guys like Amon, you can also pick up in 5'8". Targo, you can pick up in the second row forward. So there is some added flexibility with them. So I think they're all pretty solid picks. What I'll probably try to spend a little bit more time on is some of those other guys, because I think a lot of you might be aware of these players already. But if you're not, I can pretty much recommend safely a lot of those options, I think, to put into your team to begin the year. Now, starting off at the top, I've got Kurt Mann, 383k. Now, he wasn't pulling up any trees last season, but in 2020, Kurt Mann was actually a very good option when he was playing at the 5'8 spot and also at hooker. The word is from the man himself, Barry Tui, up in Newcastle, that Kurt Mann is very strongly rumoured to be starting in the number 13 spot for the Knights. Now, him playing 13, we kind of need to see, I think, in pre-season trials, potentially what kind of minutes he might get. Him playing in the forwards, I think, can offer some good value at 383k. To get a player in who can provide some decent base. Obviously, the draw for the Knights is not very good. I've got them ranked 13th at the moment, but we know that he can provide some good scores when he does actually play in the forwards. For example, looking at 2020, where Kurt Mann had a total season average of 64, and he was very good for me actually for Supercoach. Now, looking at his scores when he got shifted to the hooker spot, now obviously the hooker and number 13 are very different, but it's a general sense of what he can do when he plays in the forwards. So his scores there were 51, 77, 69, 55, 89, 35 and 70. There's some decent scores in there, and I think playing in the forwards just gives you a little bit more solidity in terms of consistency in terms of point scoring. So I don't mind the look of Kurt Mann to begin the year, especially if you get full confirmation that he plays at 13, and if he's playing decent minutes, I do quite like that as well. Now Xavier Coates, it's a similar story, I think, how I feel with him as I do with Adokar. The base is just not very good there. You can see 18 points a game. And 358k is a decent price, don't get me wrong, especially if you are looking to go for any kind of member of the Storm backline. But I typically don't see members of the Storm backline like the centers and the wingers not scoring that well for Supercoach. For example, Addo Carr averaged 54 playing in that lethal Melbourne backline, and the year prior to that he averaged 53, and then 2018 it was 51, 2017 52. So Addo Carr was consistently giving you in the low to mid 50s. I don't see much of a difference between the way that Addo Carr is going to be used at the Storm and Coates. I think they're just going to be stuck out on the wing, not asked to do that much work out of their own end, and just finish off tries. Now obviously the Storm can create plenty of tries for someone like Coates. I think you might be a little bit more frustrated with someone like Coates. You know, you might find the Storm have a really nice matchup, but he just doesn't score you any good. And then you might see that the Storm have a really tough matchup, then he might get a double in that game. And so I think trying to predict his scores is going to be really tough. I don't quite like these low base wingers. I mean, I know it sounds hypocritical because we know how good Alex Johnson was last season, but I think that was a bit of a difference where the Rabbitohs attack was just so slick, and you kind of just know where they're going to go. The Rabbitohs are just going to go down their left, but they're so good at those block plays that you know that Johnston is probably going to profit and normally can very reliably score like a double almost every game. Coates and Addo Carr, I don't think they quite had that level of consistency. They tended to score like 4 or 5 tries in a game, and then maybe just like 1 or nothing in a game. Overall, Coates, you can see the scoring. He really needs those tries to bump up his scoring average, so I'm not too keen on Coates, to be honest. I do prefer the likes of a Kurt Mann, maybe like a Tony Staggs, and then just fill your centre wing with a lot of these other cheaper guys. Owen Cobbo is pretty interesting. He's got pretty decent base, bit of a young star for the Broncos. Now he also has been tipped potentially to be getting a wing spot for the Broncos on the left hand side, and Jordan Pereira on the right. So we can probably talk about both of these guys in combination. They both have similar base stats of 25 and 26. Pereira is actually pretty decent at coming out of his own end when we saw for the Dragons, so he has got some decent tackle breaking stats. You can see 15 evasive compared to Cobbo's 10. Overall, I don't think there's that much to actually split the difference between Cobbo and Pereira. You could make an argument that the fact that Pereira, if he does play in the right wing outside of Tony Staggs, because of how good he is in terms of being able to break tackles, he could very easily create more tries for Pereira compared to Cobbo on the left. So I do think it's a bit of a 50-50 between the two. Maybe if you just need to save some money, instead of going with Cobbo, you maybe go with Pereira, but Cobbo does seem to be a bit more of an exciting pick, so I probably would recommend Cobbo in a straight shootout, but in a 50-50, if you're looking to save money especially, I'd probably just go with Pereira. Now the final kind of centre wing cheapie I'll talk about is Oliver Gildart from the West Tigers. So he's come over from the UK. Tigers do have a pretty tough run of games to begin the season. I've got them ranked as 14th. Trying to find stats from the Super League has been pretty tough. Anyone who knows good stats from there, definitely let me know in the comments below. But I've only been able to find his kind of try scoring ability. He definitely seems like a player who does score a lot of tries for them. He scored 65 tries in around 144 appearances, so it's a pretty good strike rate. Whether or not he can replicate that going down to the Tigers. Now, to be honest, the Tigers I actually think are an okay attack. I think they can have the ability to score points, so I'm not too kind of discouraged by him going to the Tigers. The problem with the Tigers, in my opinion, is their defense. They just leak too many points, but I do think they're okay in terms of point scoring. So Gildart, 280k. Again, I think he could be one of those options where you might not necessarily want him in your starting 4. You might just want him on the bench, hopefully just to make some money, just because he is playing for a team that's not as good as some of these other ones like the Storm or the Roosters or the Panthers. And so I'd probably keep him as one of your bench kind of cheapy centre wings, hopefully just to make you some cash. Well, that's it, guys. That is my kind of full-on comprehensive guide of the centre wing position. Hopefully this video doesn't go for too long. Let me know in the comments below, though, if you found some value out of it. Really appreciate a thumbs up if you did enjoy it, and do consider subscribing as well to the channel below. Any comments or questions, leave them in the comments below as always, and I'll see you all in the next video.